Their network just must be really slow. All right, so we're recording now finally. So we're going to continue off with the saving of the preferences. So yesterday we created this little preferences activity. We're extending the base activity, and we need to have some way of saving this data that they typed into the Android preferences file. So to do that, I'm going to call a method that I'm going to put in the base activity, because there might be other places in other activities where I might want to save the preferences. So this is a good idea to put it in our base activity class. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm going to go to my base activity. I'm going to write this method now called save preferences. And then my preferences file will call that function from its parent class. Right? Say, yes, Dave. That's correct. So we need our save preferences. And similar to how we did it in the preferences, we need to get an object that points to the shared references file. So I can just copy this line of code. Oops. I forgot I'm on a PC with a Mac keyboard. So that's painful. So we'll go, we need to get a copy of that first. So we're going to get the shared preferences using the same name that I had before. Nope. And then we need to get an editor so that I can put these strings in here. And this is just the way they have this set up. So I need an editor object that I'm going to call the settings object.edit. And now that I have an editor object, I can use that, which is just bizarre how they do this. I can put a string using a key for that string. And remember, I used Dr. Email as the key. And the string that I want to actually save is whatever's in my Dr. Email. So if you remember, I made this a string inside the preferences class. But since I'm going to move this up, I'm going to move this up to my base activity class. So that now it's more or less global to the children's classes. Yes. Yes, I do. Good catch. Have to make that public. And I'll initially assign it to be nothing. And then in this one, this is going to actually save it, and we'll just use the string Dr. Email. Once I put all of my items in here, I can add a bunch of more editor.put Boolean if I'm going to save a Boolean like your radio button, something like that. I can do all of those, and then when I'm done, I call this commit method on the editor, and that actually writes it out to the shared preferences file, and it will then be available the next time the program starts. So that goes through the whole cycle. If you remember back in my preferences file, this actually gets the data from the shared preferences file. Okay? So now that I have some stuff in the base activity, I could actually move this up again, and I think that makes more sense to move this to the base activity, to its Oncreate method. So I have an Oncreate here. I'm going to go and get and set my global, more or less global strings here based on the shared preferences that I have. I have to format my code. Boy, it's really running slow here. All right. So, any questions on that? Let's follow it through again. On create, from the base activity, it's going to go out to the shared settings, shared preferences file for this particular file. And remember, we could have multiples of these. And from that file, I'm going to get a string and store it in my property called Dr. Email string. And if it doesn't find it in the preferences file, it's going to use this as the default string into this global variable here. Then when preferences starts up, we should, when we initialize this, we need to set the email to whatever was in the preferences. That's one thing we haven't done yet. So how do we set text based on that value? Oops, there we go. So I have the edit Dr. Email is an object that points to the edit text on my preferences layout, and I can call set text, right? And we're going to set it to the Dr. Email, and that should do it. So now when that panel gets started up, this will be set based on whatever was set in the top in the preferences file. All right. Any questions on that so far?
Can you go back to your base activity and when you created the save preferences method?
All right. So yeah, there's my save preferences. And what I would do here is I would add more things like your default calculation algorithm, things like that would all be in this one method that you would call wherever you needed that. So perhaps, and this is a design decision, in my preferences XML, the only thing I have in here is the Dr. Email. You could put, so in my layout, all I am saving is the Dr. Email. So I could add additional fields in here for other things. Or on your page for your, in my case, my BMI layout. Where is it? It's, that was my main one here. Every time they change this radio button from American to world, I could reset this global variable and call my save preferences. Right? Save a new value in my preferences file every time they change that. Then I don't need to have something specific on my preferences page. That's a design decision if you want to do that. Does that make sense to you? Otherwise, I'd have to have another radio button system on my preferences page. Right?
So you just want to save preferences.
So whenever they on a change or on click on here, I'm going to call my save preferences method. Sure, but it's more relative to this specifically. So that's, again, a design decision. Same thing with the chart. the selected chart.
Can you just have it on when you leave that view?
Yeah, you can do it wherever you want to save. And then when you start up, you're going to set those global variables in the base activity. You're going to do all of these types of things here. You're going to get the strings for the various settings you have, set them in some base activity properties that are inherited, and then use those when that preference, when that layout comes up, right? So when I go to my main BMI here, on the create here, I need to set those values for the radio buttons based on the preferences that I read in. Does that make sense? Yes, it does make sense. All right. So any questions on the preferences? It's fairly easy. It's all about this get shared preferences and using this editor, which is kind of a pain. A lot of code to do one little thing there. Just their classes are not the most intuitive. And that's all there is to shared preferences. You just have to figure out where in your code you're going to use that and set some values for those. Pretty simple. Any questions? You forgot it? Okay. I think that's about it for the shared preferences. What else was?
Email.
Oh, email, yes. So email. I forgot about that. I was just going to do that. So when they actually email, let's add some functionality to my chart logger program. So let's look at the logger. So right now we save the weight in this view, in this activity, and you could do this anywhere you want, but I'm going to add another button here to my weight logger that says email the doctor. All right, so let's add a button. I like to start from the user interface. Where are my buttons? Button, add a button right here. These, you like those? I hate trying to get that. We'll fix that later. So this is going to be email log to doctor. All right, and it's on click is going to call a function.
Now you see why I didn't use 10 fields for the alarms.
Yeah. On click. And that's going to call a method that I need to define in my weight logger class. So I need a new project here, public void email doctor on click, and it takes a view. And we're going to email the doctor. So let's see. All right. So emailing the doctor requires setting up another intent. Remember that to get access to services on the Android phone, we have to create an intent and fill in some information and pass that information to the activity that does the email. So we don't do email ourselves. We pass all the information we need that's in a message, and we send it to the device's email account that's set up on your Android. So you have to have an email system set up on your Android device in order for email to work. Then you're going to be sending it through that email system. Does that make sense? You could have a PHP, yeah, you could do an HTTP kind of thing, external, then you'd have to write the server. So we have to do this all in a try block. And we need to have some strings set up that we're going to use to create this email. So the email address is going to be Dave at Lockersoft. And my subject of my email is going to be Dave Jones weight log. And my message for the email, Dr. Heavy, and we'll put a /n in here so it looks nice. Here is my latest weight log for you to peruse. /n, sign it, Dave. All right, so that's the message that's going out. And this is where it gets complicated. If I want to send this as a file, as an attachment, I'm just going to copy the CSV file that I've already saved all my log data to, and let him deal with this whole CSV, because then he could open it up in Excel and look at all the data, right? He wants the raw data to do whatever he wants with. So I want to send the entire file as an attachment to the email. All right. So email messages, since we're using something else out of our control, we're sending all of this using an email program, we have to make this file available for the email program to be able to see, because the email program can't see inside of my Android data path, right? It's protected. So I can't just pass the name of the file because they'd never be able to read it. So I have to copy the file to someplace that every program can access. And one way to do that is to copy it to the SD card. All right, so I can copy this CSV file at its current state to the SD card, and then from the SD card, the email program can read that file in and attach it to the email. Is that a pain in the rear or what? So there, right, and you have to delete it after the email goes through, right? So to do that, I have this function that I wrote called, actually I found it on the internet and made it work here. And so in my...
if it wasn't working, it's yours.
That's right. Yes, this should work. I'm going to call it copy file to external, and I'm going to pass in this variable, and this is in my base activity class so that I can use it in any of my activities, right? So this is just a utility function that I'm going to write, and I'm going to pass it the file name, and this code will copy that file to the external SD card. So I need a file pointer to play with, a file object. I need a string of where the new file is going to end up. And I can get this out of what they call the environment, the Android environment, and I can get the path to the external storage. So it's called get external storage directory. I want to get the path of that. And then I'm going to add to that my external folder name that I'm going to put this stuff in. and I did this as like a static variable up here at the top of my class. So I'm going to call a public static final string, and I have to give it the file delimiters, like in DOS. I have a slash, and I'm going to call it health app, and another slash. So that string is going to be appended to this directory here. And that took me a while to figure that out.
What's the splat that you do
Where? Okay. So the folder structure that I get from the environment doesn't have a closing slash, so I have to put one. And then I have to put another closing slash. And the whole point of this is to keep it separate from all the other files that are on your SD card. Right? So I'm going to create this path eventually, and then I'm going to copy the data into a new file on that path. So we have to do another try block. I'm going to get a file object from this new path that I created. So this string, this ends up being just a long string of whatever the environment is to the storage directory plus my health app folder name, and that will create me a new file object that I can do stuff with. So that's very similar to Ruby. Then I need to make sure that directory works. So I want to make sure, and this is make durs, plural, meaning it will make all the folder structure in that whole path. So it'll make the health app folder, it'll make everything it needs up to that point. All right. Now I need to have an input stream to read the data in. So I have to read it into the memory and then write it back out to the file. Kind of a pain. So I'm going to open this file in. We're going to open file input, the file name that was passed into me. And this is what got passed into me from calling this function, right? Boy, maybe I should have stopped and done this later. Then I need an output file. So I need an output stream. We'll call fout. And I need a new output file stream of my new path. And I want to add it to the file name that was passed into me. So the new path is this whole directory up here with the slash health app slash, and then the name of the file that I'm passing in. That'll be the CSV file name that I call it with. So that's where it's going to save the data. I'm going to read from one file and write to another file. That's how you have to copy a file. There's no straight copy this file. Then I need a byte array because I'm going to read the bytes of the file. Then I'm going to make it a K long, so I can read and write a K of data at a time. And then I need a while loop to loop through and read and write this file, all of the bytes. I'm going to read a K at a time and write a K at a time and read a K at a time and write a K at a time. So while I can call this read. I want to read from the fn file structure. I can call the method read, and I want to read in to this buffer that I created. So it's going to read from the file into this 1K buffer. And when it gets to the end of that, this fn.read tells me how many bytes it actually read. So I'm going to, if the file is 2.5K long, it's going to read and it will return to me len1 will be 1024. So 1024 is not equal to -1, so it's going to continue on the loop. When this finally reads beyond the end of the file, len1 will be -1. So that will tell it that I've read enough. I can't do any more.
There's no more to read.
No more to read, right? Exactly, right. So then once I've read it into the buffer, I can call my output file to write out the buffer starting at position 0 on the buffer and however many bytes I read in from the last read. All right, does that make sense? A little bit. I'm reading a little bit, writing a little bit, reading a little bit, writing a little bit. Read to the end of the line. I got all I can read. I write all I have, and I quit the loop. When I quit the loop, I need to close my files.
You don't have to reposition your 0 spot what you put in there.
No, because I'm always going, this byte array is just this chunk of memory, and when the read will always read it at the beginning and put it in the beginning of the buffer.
That's the 0 position of that buffer.
Yes, of the buffer, not the file. Right, correct. All right, and then what I want this this little function to do is return a file object that I can use in the program that called it. So to do that, I have to then create this file object that points to the new file on the SD card that I just created. So I can say file equals new file of my new path plus my file name, because I'm keeping the same name. And then I can check to see if everything worked okay. I'm going to say if my file.exists, then I'm going to return my file object. All right? Otherwise, I had some type of an error here, and I need to catch all my errors. And so I'm going to catch the errors here. And if I have some error, I'm just going to say toast it. Help. File error. Then at the very end, I have to have a return, because if the file doesn't exist, this method still has to return something. So I need to return an empty file, basically nothing. So I'm going to return a null at this point. So if the file exists, it's going to return at this point. It'll never get to this line. If all of this happens and the catch happens, it doesn't happen, at the very end, the worst case is it's going to return a null at the end of this. All right, so that's a piece of code. I believe that is on GitHub if you want to copy that off of GitHub. All right, so now I have my little copy to external. I need to go to my logger, and I have to actually call this now. There's still a lot of code. We'll have to finish this tomorrow, I think. So at this point, I can say copy file to external, and I give it my file name, which is a global that we'll deal with tomorrow. And then there's a bunch of more code that I actually have to set some data, create an intent to call the intent, and that'll send the email. All right?
Monday.
Monday. We'll do that Monday, yes. I might as well put my catch in here.
Oh, I can't go to his office.
Oh, I couldn't log into that window, so I couldn't walk in the back.
See you Monday.
All right, we'll see you. So I'm going to have my little toasted here just to get that going. I have to spell throwable, right? All right, so that's enough. We'll do the rest on Monday. Stop.